Yeah, I don't wanna slow down, I don't wanna slow down, I don't wanna slow down till I burn out. I just wanna live fast, I don't wanna look back and say I put it down more than I did now. Sometimes it can be hard, yeah, it can be hard, yeah, it can be hard when you grow up. People fill you with doubt, just thinking about what you're gonna do now. But we only got one chance and got one life to live. And it's do or die, gotta make it count, so lose your worries, let your problems go on until nobody burns out. I ain't never gonna slow down. I ain't never gonna slow down.
Hi, y'all. How's everybody doing? Okay, so in an effort to save a little bit of time, I'm going to talk through a little bit of the format because this is the raw footage for what will be a podcast that will be released outside of YouTube in the future. So real quick, I'm going to talk through the format, and because today is about my Crohn's journey, it's going to be a lot of me talking, and I wanted to throw out when you guys can get involved in this process. So the format will always be a discussion. Today is with myself, which is kind of weird, but hey, welcome to my world. But in the future, I hope to be interviewing folks of different sorts, both with Crohn's. My mom is going to do an interview with me about the impact on family. My husband's going to do an interview. I'm hoping to get my sister on here because she's a mental health professional. We did a video a couple of years ago about the impact of mental health and IBD, as well as some other folks that I have worked with on my ADA plan, accommodation plan at work, and just visiting about disability in general. So at any rate, I wanted to kind of visit a little bit at the beginning before I jump into the planned program about the format. So the first 30-45 minutes of this will always be the planned content, interview, discussion, whatever we're talking about, whoever my guest is, that will be the focus. I ask you guys to ask questions throughout because I'm going to do a Q&A at the end. And then when I edit all of this down, I hope to edit out oohs, ums, dead periods, but I will include the Q&A on the podcast that will go out live. So that is kind of the format. I really appreciate everyone for being here. I'm going to do a quick run through of who showed up live for me. I see you and appreciate you. Hey, RC Scott. Eva was letting me talk through my nerves a little earlier because it's always a little nerve-wracking to talk about your butt. Bonnie is here, and I'm sending Bonnie good vibes. For everyone out there that doesn't know, Bonnie's going through cancer right now, has round 3 of chemo on Thursday. We want to send Bonnie good energy and good vibes. So if you run across Bonnie out in the community, please lift her up and give her some love, because that is a scary thing, but you've got this, Bonnie. Hey, Deidre, love you, friend. Thank you for the congratulations. Appreciate you more than you know. Hey, cool gamer. Good to see a friend. Always appreciate you. Regina Duke, hello. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you, my friend. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Rachel, hello. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate this, Rachel. I really do. And again, I kind of am using this series to talk about my experience, but I want this to be a place where everybody can kind of gather and talk through kind of what they're going through, whether it's a chronic illness or something like cancer that hopefully you'll be able to push through and overcome. Bonnie's going to get through hers. I know this. So let's support one another no matter what you're going through. But this is a safe space. So all of my mods out there, if you see anybody acting a fool, please lock them down for me. I appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to get on with the scheduled program. Again, if you have any questions for me, just drop them in the chat and I will address them when I get through the planned section. So today is all about my Crohn's journey. So, ladies and gentlemen and non-binary citizens of the world, welcome to the most audacious, the most daring, the most gut-wrenchingly honest podcast in the world of Crohn's disease. Get ready to unleash your inner sass and dive deep into the world of intestinal chaos. This is Gut Instinct. My name is Barrett, Laurie, crony, humorist, IBD vlogger, and a disabled badass. I'm here to shake things up, challenge the status quo, and give a voice to those who've been silenced by our own guts. This is not your average podcast. Oh no, we are the no-holds-barred, tell it like it is, sassy best friend you've always wanted and your parents warned you about. Crohn's disease may have tried to knock us down, but we're here to fight back with a vengeance. We're going to tackle the tough topics, break down the barriers, and leave no stone unturned in our quest for the truth about this infuriatingly unpredictable condition. So buckle up, my fellow gut warriors, because Gut Instinct is about to take you on a wild ride. We'll bring you the latest research, expert insights, and personal stories that will make you laugh, cry, and maybe even question your own sanity. We'll debunk the myths, share the triumphs, and commiserate over the struggles. From the embarrassing bathroom mishaps to the triumphs of finding the perfect bathroom with a lock, we'll cover it all. No topic is off limits, no question too taboo. So bring your questions to our live Q&A at the end of every episode. Whether you're a seasoned Crohn's warrior or just starting your journey, Gut Instinct is your go-to source for all things gutsy. Get ready to laugh, cry, and maybe even throw a few punches at your own digestive system. This is Gut Instinct, where we embrace the chaos, celebrate the victories, and remind you that you're not alone in this battle. So grab your favorite heating pad, a cup of peppermint tea, and let's dive headfirst into the world of Crohn's disease. Gut Instinct, because sometimes you've got to trust your gut. So first, I want to discuss what IBD is and also what Crohn's disease is. And I'm going to give you a very clinical definition of both, just so we have a baseline of what we're talking about. IBD stands for inflammatory bowel disease, which is a chronic inflammation disease that affects the digestive tract. It is characterized by inflammation and damage to the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, leading to various symptoms and complications. Crohn's disease is a specific type of IBD. It is a chronic inflammatory condition that can affect any part of the GI tract from the mouth to the anus. However, it most commonly affects the small intestines and the beginning of the large intestines, the colon. Crohn's disease is characterized by periods of flare-ups and remission, with symptoms such as abdominal pain, diarrhea, fatigue, weight loss, and inflammation in the digestive tract. Both IBD and Crohn's disease are autoimmune disorders, meaning that the body's immune system mistakenly attacks its own healthy tissues, leading to inflammation and damage. The exact cause of IBD and Crohn's disease is still unknown, but factors such as genetics, environmental triggers, and an overactive immune system are believed to play a role. It's important to note that while IBD and Crohn's disease share similarities, they are not the same. Crohn's disease is a specific type of IBD, and there are other types of IBD, such as ulcerative colitis. Each type of IBD has its own unique characteristics and patterns of inflammation within the digestive tract. So with that as our baseline, let's visit a little bit about my journey. So my first memory of being in the hospital was as a kindergartner. After a few weeks of what my mom called painful poops, she reported to the ER doctor in Lexington, Missouri, who was also a family friend, that I was having nausea and having trouble with painful poops. Upon examination, the doctor determined that I was suffering from nausea. I'd had some weight fluctuations, and as a 6-year-old, that was kind of scary. And he believed there was a small abscess that was starting to form near my anus. He sent me home with nausea medication, suppositories, or what my mom called poop candles, and a topical antimicrobial cream to treat the small abscess. According to medical records, I would be treated multiple times by the same clinician for the same digestion and inconsistent eating habits at the little hospital in Lexington between 1988 and 1990. The consensus being I was reacting to the stress of starting school and a custody battle my parents were mired in over the next few years. What I remember most about the experience was the shame. The shame I felt for having to spend so much time in the bathroom, for crying whenever I could manage to poop without feeling like I was passing a stool filled with glass. Also, the shame, the one and only time I remember having an accident at school. If that was my first undiagnosed Crohn's flare, it seemed to settle out in the mid-1990s. And pretty much over the next decade, I wouldn't experience anything close to those symptoms. Instead, it was decided that I had nervous belly and had urgent bathroom needs when experience a bout of nervous belly. One consistent theme throughout my life has been what can only be described as weight swings, with periods where I would become dangerously thin. So if you're a Crohnie, how many of you have heard that before? I want to show you some photos of what I mean by dangerously thin. In my vlog that comes out tomorrow, you're going to see these photos, but here's one of me at 29. I'm 6'1". So at this point I was about 166 pounds, I think. This was when I hit 30 and I got to the high 150s. And again, I can't really remember much about the cause of what caused this particular weight drop, other than I remember losing somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 pounds over the course of about 2.5 months. At this time, I was primarily vegan because I started to keep a food journal and noticed that meat was difficult for me to digest and caused me to have irregular stools and some increased diarrhea symptoms. This is a picture of me in 2016. At this point, I think I lost about 60 pounds. I went from about 225, which was kind of a high point for me, not now, but then was a high point for me. And I dropped again about 60 pounds in this picture. For that, again, I can only explain as what they were calling nervous belly at the time. Basically, nausea was a regular occurrence. And what I found was that I just sort of stopped eating. This point was in my life was a scary time because I realized for the first time I was lying to people in my life about food. And this was a point where I was telling folks that loved me I was doing intermittent fasting. And to the point that my mom got very concerned about what was going on and whether or not I needed to see a medical professional. I don't think at this time I had connected my relationship with food, my relationship with nausea and my digestive tract. I don't think I'd put all that together to know maybe what my problem was and what was brewing that I wasn't even aware of. So let me see. In 2016, at the age of 34, I once again had a dramatic weight loss. This was the time where I lost about 60 pounds in 3 months. I'd become so used to scrutiny over these periods, I found myself lying, which was the result of shame. In this case, I think it was self-induced shame because I had not been made fun of, but people just sort of made comments that were pretty hurtful about my weight. And what's wild about it is in the gay community, I remember people, every time I would get rail thin, dangerously thin, I would almost be celebrated by friends for like, what are you doing to look so good? Girl, nothing about that looked good. But anyway, that was something that I now realize is that so much of my relationship with food, my weight, and my own confidence was tied to the shame I felt over being unable to control my weight, whether I gained weight or lost weight. It was just, it's a through line of my life that I don't think I recognized until I took on this project and started writing down my history. I had an ex who was a doctor, and he had told me for several years that he had concerns about my digestive health because he knew my diarrhea and bathroom urgency issues with regards to using the restroom wasn't normal. What I mean by bathroom urgency is for folks with Crohn's, when we're going through periods of bowel distress, like what I'm going through right now, there are times where we have, or I have, less than 30 seconds to get to a bathroom. And if you think about that, that is not a lot of time. If you are out in public, it is really hard to get to a clean space to lock yourself off from the world and use the restroom. So that's what I mean when I say bathroom urgency. And most of us Crohnies are talking about that specifically. So in the fall of 2019, my body revolted in a new and awful way. I developed a pain around my anus. The first 3 medical professionals I saw about the painful lesion, as I described it, told me I had a bad case of hemorrhoids. They told me to avoid anal sex and sent me on my way. The troubling thing about this diagnosis was that I hadn't had anal sex in many years, at least not as the recipient due to both discomfort and also my sexual position preference. By December 2019, I could no longer sit upright. I could not drive a car. I could not sleep more than a few hours at a time as the pain became too much. Also, the hemorrhoid appeared to be leaking a fluid that was nasty stanky, y'all. Like, not cute. Really not cute. I like to say, boy, howdy, I was a real sexy mess for Ricky back then. And bless him, he went ahead and married me that December. Anyway, my husband got me in to see his physician, who is the first gay male physician that I had ever had the privilege of going to see. He was also the first doctor to give me a step in the right direction towards diagnosis. The moment I showed him this spot, he immediately identified it as a leaking abscess or a fistula and told me that I would need to see a colorectal surgeon for an exam under anesthesia and a colonoscopy. In January of 2020, I underwent a ceton placement surgery to treat the fistula, but it was determined that I didn't show any other signs in the colonoscopy for a Crohn's diagnosis at that time. So remember, this is the second week in January. This is important for the next point in the timeline. What I want to say about the ceton, for those that are wondering, there are two types. One is a cutting ceton, which is one that is tightened over time until it breaks the tract open. That sounds awful. Thankfully, neither of mine were cutting cetons. Mine was a draining ceton. Think of it like a rubber band that goes through the tract, down through the anus, up and down through the tract that's leaking, and they tie a little knot so that the infection can drain out and allow the tract to heal. I had one placed in January. In February, when I went in for the follow-up, which was only 3 weeks later after the surgery, so the second week in February of 2020, when I went in to see her, I explained that I was having pain in the same region, and it felt higher up than the other one. So once again, she had me lay forward, ass up, has several residents come in and do the poke test, which, who doesn't love that? Then after a few oohs and ahs, and not the good kind, they had a little device that they put inside to do a quick quadrant check to see if by chance something else was going on. And to her surprise, she believed I had a second fistula forming already and the possibility that a third was beginning. At this point, they put me on a rush for another exam under anesthesia to place the ceton in the second tract. So I had one at 6 and one at noon. And to do a colonoscopy to look for any inflammation or anything that might indicate Crohn's so that they could put me on a Remicade infusion to try and stop the fistulas from forming. It was during that colonoscopy that Dr. Smith, the colorectal surgeon who, along with Dr. Deepak, my GI, I credit with literally saving my life, they found that not only did I have inflammation along my intestine, but I also had the beginning of stricture, which is when the intestine starts to close and tighten, and in some cases can completely contract, at which point it would be necessary to do a section removal. This was what Dr. Deepak needed to diagnose me with complex perianal Crohn's disease and start the process for Remicade infusions. Remember, this is February of 2020. In March of 2020, I was approved for Remicade infusions and began the loading doses, which are very close together. By the third loading dose, all of my fistula tracts had completely dried up and had healed miraculously. It was like magic. I couldn't even believe it. I could sit down. The pain that had haunted me for months and months and months was gone. However, the stricture did not appear to be impacted enough for his liking. So we went in and did an MRI, and he took the tests from that MRI and the colonoscopy and began to fight for Remicade at a higher dosage. Currently, I was at 800. At that time, I was at 800 milligrams every 8 weeks, and he fought for me to get bumped up to 1,200 milligrams monthly. It took 6 months, best I remember, to actually get to the point of monthly. But during that time, when the insurance company bumped me down to 6 weeks instead of 8 and bumped my dosage up to 1,000 milligrams, the stricture started to open back up. And that gave him the ammunition he needed to go in and say, yes, you have to pay for this monthly, and we need it to be 1,200 milligrams a month. So that is my long, rocky road to getting the Remicade infusions that legitimately saved my life. So I don't say it lightly when I say that I I had some really dark times in 2019, in that fall. I do think that some of it had to do with being a gay man and being treated by heterosexual doctors. Nothing against straight doctors at all. However, I did find myself falling in a gap where they made assumptions and sort of sent me on my way because of my sexuality. And that's something I want to explore in a future episode more. If I can get my family doctor on here, Dr. Proletsky, I'd like to have him on just to talk about that, because it was amazing how no less than 4 medical professionals, I am assuming all of whom identified as straight, they presented that way to me based on their talking of spouses, etc. At any rate, misdiagnosed, and it resulted in months and months and months of pain and having to leave the workforce, not being able to drive a car. I mean, really basic stuff that happened because I think they were all too comfortable writing this off as, I will never forget, I had one nurse practitioner in particular who told me that maybe I needed to slow down my fun sex life. I don't think I'll ever forget that one. That's stuck with me a long time, and to this day makes me furious when I think about just what the impact of that was on my overall health over the next few years. So I think it in a lot of ways taught me a lot, taught me that I had to fight for myself, which this Bonnie says fighting for care sucks. Yes, it does. Feeling like you have to fight for yourself is awful. Rachel Adams says it does. Insurance companies will fight even on regular doses. Yes. And also there is bias, definitely. While I don't think that I'm not the only one. I mean, we could talk about bias in healthcare all across the spectrum, from women of color and infant mortality rates. There are all kinds of discrepancies in care, and that's a whole discussion I'd like to have in the future and have some guests on to talk about. But it is a through line of my story that I recognized the lack of a doctor who understood, again, this is, I told you all I would be blunt, just sexual positions, knowing that just because I'm gay doesn't mean I was on the receiving end of anal sex. Just that little information alone could have changed so much about, my experience and what it was like to go through this and feel very alone, because I don't think patients should feel that way. I don't think that anybody who's going through something really scary should feel like I'm in this alone and I'm not being listened to. That's just too much. So at any rate, I'm going to pop up a few comments and respond to them here. So started so young, had to be tough. Yes. It's funny. I don't know that I recognized that first instance back in the late 80s, early 90s was even a Crohn's related thing until my medical records were forwarded on to my doctors now, and the linkage was made by them. I think I look at it now and I think, well, of course. The other thing I will say is Crohn's was not as much was known about Crohn's disease then. The research and the information about what works and what treats it has really come a long way. So I want to say that's another big factor here. Is I think I was in the right age group where I didn't necessarily have clinicians who had the tools they needed to make a quality diagnosis. I do love the kitty terms. And actually what's funny is painful poops is in the medical records. I had a laugh with my mom about that when I was reading it. I was like, what is a painful poop and what is a poop candle? Like, what in the world? So I do remember the embarrassment of having to go to the nurse's office and sit there for her to help me with the poop candle, because at 6, I didn't have the dexterity to figure out a poop candle. And then sitting in there to wait to go to the bathroom. I do remember that and that shame. And again, on a nonfiction piece that I'm working on that will hopefully be a book that I can get published, that's going to be a big section. Just talking about that being the beginning point of shame and the impact that shame has on going to doctors and talking about everything that's going on in your healthcare, because certain things are tied to shame and you're kind of afraid to address them. The question from Rachel D. Adams. Oh, sorry. I wanted to say this. I do love the kitty terms. I'm not a crony, but IBD. All the love. Holy cow. You know what I'm talking about. So did my mom or other friends ever believe that I had an ED? Yes. I should also, in full disclosure, I also had a pretty wild ride of my early 20s with drug use. And so I think there was also a part of them that worried that might have been an issue too. If, again, just full disclosure and honesty, I think that was part of it. But yes, I definitely had uncomfortable discussions about, why wasn't I eating? I pushed food around the place. I mean, just lots of uncomfortable discussions. And then on the flip side of that eating disorder, in the mid 90s, growing up with my dad, which I've also talked about on some other streams in the past, the opposite of that reaction. I did have a period in the mid 90s where I gained quite a bit of weight. I went through a chubby era, probably puberty, very normal. And my dad, on the flip side, used to make me sit on my hands and would make comments about what I ate. So to say my relationship with food has always been a little messed up is 100. So, working on that, working through that. Yes, several doctors actually messed it up. So I'm going to talk about what Deidre Wright's romance says. It's the same thing they do with females that are fat with PCOS or worse, anyone with fibromyalgia. Yes, I've heard this. It's always important to get a doctor that truly understands your pain and experience. And I once had a doctor tell me she didn't have any tools that would fit my privates for a PAP because I'm overweight. Oh, wow. I didn't understand what Crohn's was, not really, until now. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Deidre, I'd love to have you on at some point to talk about your experience, because again, I intend to talk about disability across the spectrum. So anybody that suffers from chronic illness, if you want to come on with me and discuss it, this is going to be a space for it. It's not just going to be Crohn's. That is going to be most of my focus because that's my chronic illness. But I kind of want to open the floor to anybody that's going through a chronic illness. Hey, Tiff. Love you lots. Yes, go do all the things. Love you lots. Okay. So some doctors like assuming things and getting things done too quickly. Yes, I've had doctors disagree with the amount of pain I was in because I've learned to tolerate it so well. That's something that I don't think I understood until I was diagnosed, that there is a real reluctance on doctors' parts to prescribe pain medication. And I understand why. Again, being someone who struggled with addiction in my early 20s, I completely understand why they need to be cautious. However, I do think there's a point where the patient's care needs to supersede their bias. And if they are unsure, then they should ask another physician or clinician to step in and give their feedback on whether or not they think it's needed. Because this is so true. When the shingles situation happened this year for me, due to the pre-authorization mess I've been going through with my insurance company, what's so interesting is when they asked me at the hospital what my pain level was when I was in the ER and I had all my clothes off and I was sitting there naked and they were touching my body. And every time they'd touch me, I'd just jump out of the chair and scream. And they'd say, what is that pain level? And I'd say an 8 or a 9. And they said, what do you mean an 8 or a 9? You just jumped out of that chair. And I was like, ma'am, I have literally had plastic tubing tied into a little knot around my anus twice that I had to keep in there for a year. Trust and believe I can handle pain, right? So I do think that the tolerance of pain level is a thing and like a real something that needs to be talked about. Oh, thanks, Tammy. Thank you. It was really scary to do this today. I was actually texting some friends about being really nervous, which is unusual for me. Um, oh, thanks. Thanks, Des. Appreciate you. Love you for showing up. I'm doing Insta Love University and just realized they have a class about writing with chronic pain and disability. I'm glad people are talking about this. Me too, Tiff. Me too. I'd even love to see some characters talk more about or have a chronic illness, because that's something I want to write about in some of my fiction, just because it's part of my reality. But yes to that. Yes to all that energy. Yes, diverticulitis. Rachel, I was put in the hospital in 2023 January when they did this game on my Remicade infusion and put me off for a month in 23. I ended up with diverticulitis and I was in the hospital for that, and it was awful. So yes, and I can't believe that was a 6 out of 10 on that scale. Wow, wow, wowza. Yeah. So anyway, that I feel for you, because diverticulitis is no joke. And if for those of you that don't know what it is, diverticulitis is when you get little sometimes it's caused by nuts, seeds, things like that get caught in the digestive tract and create a little pocket in the intestine, becomes infected. The way I knew I had something going on was it hurt to walk down the stairs. Like pressure on your intestines is what let me know that was happening. And again, I went in with a similar pain. I think I said 7 or 8 though on the pain scale. Rachel, you might be tougher than me, but again, I haven't done childbirth either, so I know that one's awful and I can't even imagine the pain level for that. So yes, when they ask about pain on the scale, I never know what to say. It's like, what capacity is your scale at? Exactly. Because Des might be able to relate to this as well. Like anyone who struggles with chronic illness and specifically chronic pain, the ability to deal with it and to manage through extreme bouts of pain is so real. And I think people underestimate how much pain you can be in. And for someone else, that might be a 9 or a 10. And for us, it might be a 5 or a 6, right? And they're still hesitant to prescribe something for pain. But I will say this, they offered me gabapentin for the shingles, and I ended up turning it down because, and again, I talk about this in the vlog tomorrow, but part of the reason I turned that down was it causes more digestive issues. So for anyone with Crohn's, possibly those with IBD, ulcerative colitis, etc., anytime I've had a pain medication, oh boy, I get constipated like nobody's business, and that causes me some other problems. So I'd almost rather suffer in silence with Tylenol. Rachel D. Adams says, basically, we always have these openings in our intestines. That's it. But when something gets stuck in them and it gets infected, the last time I went to the ER, I said an 8 to 9 out of 10. Oh, Rachel, I am so sorry. It was awful. Okay, here's what I was looking for. I say 9 to 10 for childbirth or breaking a tooth at the root. Oh, okay, I haven't done that one. Oh my gosh. Okay, Rachel, you win. That's intense. That's super intense. I've become so used to pain and discomfort that someone else's scale would be higher. Yes, agree. Feel that. That's Des. Coffee Reading Writing for those of you that want to follow. And please, anyone out there that's listening to this on the podcast, I'm going to go ahead and link the names of the folks who are here in the descriptions, wherever it's listed, so you can follow them on their YouTube channels, because a lot of them are sharing their journey with chronic illness and their illnesses on their channels as they talk about their main point of their channel, which is usually something to do with writing, because I'm a writing nerd. Deidre says, yes, they don't understand that when you live daily with pain, your body adjusts somewhat. Totally. 100. Oh, yes, to laxatives and softeners. I actually take Miralax every day. It's a part of my daily regimen. My colorectal surgeon, Dr. Smith, who is amazing, actually told me I could take Miralax every day. It was perfectly safe. So I've done that for years, and it has saved me. Oh, same with Ricky. My husband also has a lower pain tolerance. And same, Ricky can tell when I'm in pain, and he acts a little bit like, I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember this movie, but Terms of Endearment, there's a scene where Shirley MacLaine like loses her mess on a nurse trying to get her doctor, the doctor of her daughter, to give her a pain shot. And literally that's my husband anytime I'm in the hospital with pain. So I so appreciate everybody who turned out for this. I kind of wanted this first episode to just be a baseline of my Crohn's story. And of course, there's more to this. The fight every year for Remicade. I'm going to visit about my insurance company overriding my doctor for my treatment, for them deciding what was best. for me instead of my doctor, and changing my meds and what that caused for me, and also all of the impacts of pre-authorization. But that felt like its own episode, not this baseline story. Hello, Margaret Pinard. Thanks for popping in. I'm really grateful that you all gave me the space and the time to kind of talk through what this was like for me. And again, for those of you that are listening, you're going to miss a lot of this live discussion piece. I'm going to throw some of the questions into each episode when I edit them down for release. But for those of you that want to join live, please show up for the chat and throw your questions in there if you're out there listening somewhere else. These will be on my YouTube channel on Sundays, and I will open the chat up to any questions you might have. So I 100% appreciate everyone who turned out for me. Rachel says it could be its own series, 9 ex-patient advocate. Yes, ex-patient advocates. Yes, we could. I seriously, you guys, I want all kinds of ideas. So please come to chats with anything you think should be covered that I haven't talked about or need to talk about in the future. And I look forward to doing more on gut instinct. So I appreciate everyone for turning out for this. If you're out there listening, my name is Barrett Laurie. I am a Crohny, IBD vlogger, and general disabled badass. So if you want to join me on my journey, check out this podcast series, Gut Instinct. I appreciate everyone who turned up today. Please stay healthy and well, and we'll see you next